Welcome to Mindshift, where we explore how mindsets can help you live a life of passion and purpose. On this show, we'll explore how our thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs shape our outlook on life and influence our decisions. We'll talk to experts from various fields and hear from individuals who have transformed their lives by adopting new mindsets. Whether you're feeling stuck, searching for life's purpose, or simply curious about the power of the mind and how it's changing the future, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Mindshift. If you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button and follow along for some tips and tools on how to become your best self. Today, we're talking about ethical non-monogamy, and specifically holding space for your partners without taking on their emotions, their energy, without really taking on their stuff, but providing a safe space to be able to work through it, to support them, to really show up for them where they're at without trying to interject our experience onto what they're feeling. And today I just have some amazing guests. I've had both of them on the show. If you follow me, you probably recognize Dr. Amber Hull and Alexis Logan. They're both amazing, really, really incredible experts in their field, and I'm really excited to hear their perspectives on this. So, Dr. Amber, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Absolutely. So my name is Dr. Amber Hall. I'm a private practice pediatrician, board certified in pediatrics here in Las Vegas. I'm also the CEO and founder of Artemis Luxury Wellness, which is focused on women's health and human sexuality.
Thank you so much. And Alexis, do you want to do a quick introduction as well?
Hi, I'm Alexis, sex therapist in DC area, specializing in E&M, poly, kink, and BDSM.
Thank you so much. So I just want to jump right into this discussion and hear some of your perspectives, and we'll just kind of take it from there. So, in your experience, Dr. Amber, what has this looked like, and has this been a challenge for you to both hold space for your partners and to communicate, hey, I need you just to listen to me. I don't need any advice. I don't need anything, or whatever that looks like for you. How does that look like? And what's the best way in your experience to really communicate your needs in those moments?
So I'm going to kind of refer back to medical training because a lot of my context comes from there. Also, I'll put the caveat on this that I'm solo polyamorous, so I do not have nor do I desire domestic partnerships. And I put that card on the table right up front. Like I do not have a desire to intertwine my life or finances with romantic partners. So everyone in my life is very well aware of that. I, at this point, am in an open triad. And so I have some experience on the topic from a personal level, but from a clinical standpoint, I think that one of the things that has been really helpful for me is learning that boundaries are the distance at which I can love myself and you simultaneously. And in the course of medical training, and I would imagine that this is the case with therapists too, we learn to compartmentalize things because, when I walk from one room or one home, I do house calls to the next, I have to leave the emotions and the headspace that I just came from. I have to leave that behind because the next person is expecting me to walk in and give my undivided attention to them and be fully present in that moment. And so I think that the lesson here applies not only to our romantic relationships, but how do we protect ourselves and our sovereignty in our professional lives in order to show up as best we can for people across platforms, so to speak.
I absolutely love that, and really protecting your personal space to be able to fully be present and to show up, which is so important. I know oftentimes I'll be talking to a partner and I want to help, right? And there was a meme that I read recently that basically said, if I'm interjecting my perspective onto your situation, then I'm simply telling you what I would do if I was in your situation. I'm not actually showing up for you and understanding what your perspective, what your experience is. I'm kind of denying all that and trying to interject myself into your situation. So I thought that was absolutely beautiful. Alexis, how does showing up and holding space for your partners look like? And how are you able to really provide that space and separate it kind of from the rest of your life to be able to provide a safe space, but not take on that energy?
That's a great question. And I think it comes down to the type of relationship or relating that I'm having with our particular partners. Um, Similar to Dr. Amber, I am currently solo poly, still entertaining whether or not I'd like to be in partnership, but like for right now, in this time and season of my life, this is what it is. And I thoroughly love that. And so I think that the first part is providing context to your partners about where you are at and what you are available for, sort of comes into this. And then when supporting them, context. A lot of work that I do with my clients is around understanding everyone's context and what they're coming in with and over communicating. So for me, it's okay, you're coming to me with something that you want to unpack or process or whatever. What is the context you're coming in with, and what do you need from me in the moment? Do you need me just to sit next to you, allow you to vent with the I hear you, like what do you need, like what do you need in the moment? And then at the end or after you're done expressing, what do you need help with after that? And so it's very much like each step of the way, almost like when we're always we're in those spaces of like, what is the consent piece? Like, what do you need every step of the way? And elevating your communication to be clear about that. And then as the person who is in the receiving mode or, wanting to help, always asking like, okay, how can I support you? You asked for this. What does this look like? Because you never want to assume that if someone is asking something of you, that you know exactly what that means. And another thing that I, remind people of is we can all agree on what the definitions are of a word in the dictionary, but what that means to people is completely different. So understanding like, I heard this and this is what it means to me. Am I tracking with you? Just so we're all on the same page. And I think those are great clarifying questions for context when you are supporting someone else.
I absolutely love that. I really love how you put that too. What do you need every single step of the way? How can I best show up here? And it's been really, really important. I know as a coach myself and having worked with a lot of coaches, the number one thing that will make me not work with you is if you just offer your perspective or advice and you don't ask me questions, because I'm just like, I don't feel like you're really listening to me then. I don't really feel like you want to understand my perspective. You just want to interject what you think is going to help when really we may not even be speaking the same language. An example of this recently for me was in my own relationship. I thought I was showing up in a really, really amazing, beautiful way for my partner. However, they communicated that, I need you to ask me on a scale from 1 to 10 how I'm doing today. And that can just really, really help me know that you care about how I'm doing today. And for me, I'm very big, acts of service type of person. So I'll do acts of service. But there was this big thing that I was actually missing simply because I didn't realize that, hey, on scale 1 to 10, how are you feeling today? And that has changed everything. So I think that's absolutely beautiful to really understand. Dr. Amber, on this topic, after they've talked, maybe vented, and gave you their perspective on the situation, what type of advice do you usually offer when you're holding space, and how can you do that without that affecting you in your personal space, your personal business, especially being solo poly?
So I think it's important to clarify from the beginning, are you asking for advice or do you just need to be heard? Because I had this situation come up just yesterday where I, was just sort of like simmering. And of course, yesterday we had a shooting in Las Vegas, and there's a lot of, historical trauma from, the Route 66 incident. And so yesterday was a very emotional day. And I reached out to a friend of mine and was like, this situation is happening and I just need to be heard. Like, I don't need you to solve it. And just getting that off my chest was really helpful. So, going back to the whole reflection and projection thing. Like, you know, it seems like most encounters, whether it's a patient encounter or, you know, someone in my personal life, it's easy for me, either they're reflecting something back on me that is making me uncomfortable about where I'm at, or I am very adept at projecting my own experience onto other people. And so I think just asking that clarifying question of, do you want my advice or do you need to be heard? And I love it when people come to me for advice. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm not a therapist, you know, I'm a pediatrician. Like I can offer what's in my wheelhouse and I can offer perspective, but you know, I have to be very careful about where my professional expertise lies and what's being asked of me, and be honest about what I can offer.
I absolutely love that. On with yesterday specifically, and you just need to be heard. Is part of being heard for you also being validated?
Absolutely. Yes. I'm nodding as if, you know, a podcast can listen to me nod, but yes, absolutely. And just having someone to be able to, that I know is going to take my side in this, right? Because they don't have any, you know, they don't have a horse in this race. And so just to be like, yes, absolutely. You're right. And sometimes I need that. And sometimes I just legitimately need to be heard. And this, I think, also comes into play with children in our lives. Like sometimes they, you know, because I have a lot of toddlers in my practice, they'll have a meltdown. And I'm like, yes, I know sometimes I get sad too. And it's okay to have a sad and cry and, you know, and then we'll pick ourselves up and we'll keep going. And it's important, I think, to, you know, when children are having those moments, to share our peace rather than to like contributing to their chaos. So again, I think that these are conversations that are applicable across encounters.
I absolutely love that. And what comes to mind is validating it without fixing it, right? Of just saying, I hear you, I see you. I don't want to fix you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just experiencing some emotion, right? I think that's absolutely beautiful. So, Alexis, when you are in the middle of your emotions and you're trying to have, like, how do you create a safe space for people, and what does that safe space look like for you when you are in the middle of feeling some intense emotions, or when you notice others are? How, because I think a lot of us, I've heard a lot, is we have to have a safe space, right? We have to have a safe space to express ourselves, express our emotions, and we have to foster that for others. I'm not going to come to you if I don't feel safe talking to you, right? So what does that safety look like for you, and how do you foster that for others to be able to express this type of stuff?
That's a great question. I would say usually when things are coming up in the middle of something, interacting with someone else, I have the history of like wanting to pull back and to just shut down. And I think a lot of us want to do that. We want to like, I don't know, what am I going to do? You know, but I have found there's more freedom in vulnerability in those moments. So what I will actually do is I will presence to them exactly what I'm feeling without sort of roping them into it. So for example, I was having a discussion with someone and I basically said, I'm feeling really angry right now. When I heard this, it just triggered something for me. I'm feeling really angry right now and I kind of want to pull back. So can you give me a second so I can take a breath and then come back into this? So I'll say that. So like in the present moment, they're hearing that, they're seeing that. And then I will just sort of emote from there. This is what I made it mean for myself when I heard this. And I don't know if that's what you meant it to be. So I'm a person, because as a person who used to fly off the handle at all times when she was younger, I was like, let me just, before I choose to fly off the handle or have a bigger reaction, let me just understand what I am reacting to in the moment, right? But I find that presencing what I'm feeling in the moment usually actually brings everyone back down, because it's almost like I like to describe it as when you're armored up, you're trying to fight someone with a shield up in front of you. and you have no idea. You're just swinging wildly. You're not even looking, like it's one of those situations. But if you can presence what is happening, it usually brings everyone back down into a place of connection, because we're not pulling out, we're staying in, we're voicing the icky, what we feel is the icky emotions that are happening for us in vulnerability. And then for other people, I will just reflect to them, yeah, I'm seeing that you're having a bit of a reaction here. I don't want to name it for you, but I see that, you're raising your voice. I'm not and especially if it's something that I'm not understanding what's happening, I'm like, you're raising your voice, I'm not understanding what's happening here. And usually I will lower my voice in that moment, simply just to be like, hey, like, there's no threat coming from here. I just want to understand what's happening. And a lot of the times that seems to help, especially again, when we're reaching for context to be able to understand. The more you can ask questions like that, I'm confused, I'm not understanding what's happening here, can you break this down for me, helps to just de-escalate. But yes, doing the icky things like vulnerability, when I about like, it's gross. Yes, it is gross, but it's actually very effective to create connection, which is where you want to be, so you can work through what's happening between the two of you.
I absolutely love that. I absolutely love how you talked about owning your own triggers too. That was absolutely incredible. Dr. Amber, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to dovetail because I think you hit on an important point, which is that it's important to de-escalate. And I've been in this situation in arguments before because I also can have a very sharp tongue, and do damage that cannot be undone. And once upon a time, I was in an argument with a partner, and he looked at me and was like, anything that I say from here on out is not going to go well. I'm going to go take a walk. And that I carried forward with me. And I do that sometimes, like, when I feel myself escalating, because you can feel your blood pressure increasing and your heart rate going up and your palms start to sweat and your mind starts to race. Like, when I recognize that happening, like, I think at this point I've developed the emotional maturity to tap the brakes and be like, listen, I'm going to take a little bit of time to formulate a response that's not going to be hurtful, because ultimately, this is not me against you. This is the two of us against this problem. And that is the important thing to keep in mind.
I absolutely love that you brought that up, and it's a tool that I've utilized a lot. I actually started developing that with my ex-wife, and when things would escalate and nobody's being heard, when everyone's in fight or flight, and your person you're fighting is your partner, it really is such a great tool to be able to remove yourself and be able to even take a walk and lower that adrenaline going through your system and be able to show up in a clear headspace and say, like, here are some solutions. I think a lot of us will say things of like, oh, this is what I would do in that position. And I think, especially as men, I'm representing the men here, we want to fix. We want to say, like, oh man, this is what I would do. Have you tried this? And I think that's such a disservice. It really, truly is, because unless it's asked, then a lot of people don't, they just want to be heard. They just really want to feel like there's a safe space for me to talk about all of this. And, maybe afterwards they will want advice. Maybe a week later they'll want advice, or maybe they'll never want advice. And that's okay. How do we just show up and be present? And if there is something triggering us, to be able to own it, like truly own it, like both of you ladies were talking about, either removing yourself, asking clarifying questions, saying, hey, this triggered me and I need some further clarification, as you were talking about, Alexis. What I'm wondering is, when your partner feels triggered, how do you help them understand that they're being triggered and own it? Because I know a lot of the times we're triggered, we say some stupid things like, oh man, when you said this, I felt this, and I feel like whatever, right? And a lot of the times that's not mine to own. That's all yours to own. I can show up, I can, offer a listening ear, I can offer support, we can vent, we can work through things together, but I'm not going to take on your trigger. I'm not going to take on your emotions. So how do you, Alexis, help your partner realize that they're being triggered over something else and take the steps to kind of walk them back to truly own that and see what they're doing?
Great question. So one of the things that I like to do, and again, because I'm a therapist, don't therapize me, all this stuff, but sometimes it's not my job, right? But one of the questions that I do find helpful is to ask them what's happening for you right now. Because usually when they're flying off the handle or they're escalating, they're like they are reacting, and most of the time it's reaction to like a pattern or something else that then has been projected. I don't know what's happening for them in the moment, but usually I start with, so what's happening for you right now? And sometimes I will actually use my body, like I'll take a step back so they know that I'm feeling like, okay, I don't know what's going on. But then I'll say, hey, what's happening for you right now? And the second question is, where are you? Because a lot of times when escalation does happen, people tend to dissociate at some level. So either it's they're running off in a pattern that they're usually running, and I'm not going to assume like what that pattern is, but if this is a pattern that that has shown itself before, again, it's calling into presence what's happening for you right now and where are you? Because I don't know if you're even here with me, and 9 times out of 10 it's been I had a previous partner who said something like that, and I know that you're not that person, but I literally was running off in this pattern, then I ran with them. And I think that's a great way to not take it personally as well. We don't always realize what people are bringing into interactions with us. We don't know their history, and 9 times out of 10, unless they've processed it and actually make concerted effort not to bring past projection into their present moments, which is not something that we always think about or do. Usually what's happening in front of us is not something that actually has to do with us. And so I like to just make sure, again, context, are we on the same page, but what's happening for you now and where are you? Because especially if it's newer and it's not something you've seen, like I've seen before, it's always that piece, and I can understand where they're coming from.
I absolutely love that. And it's so true. It's almost, I would say 99.9% of the time, your trigger has actually nothing to do with me or the situation. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine, and maybe you've had some bad past experiences, and now we're projecting those experiences onto this situation. I absolutely loved how you put that. I'm curious about your thoughts on this, Dr. Amber, about triggers with your partners and how to help them own those triggers without, taking responsibility or taking on that energy.
I think Alexis had a great answer, and I put that little pearl into my toolbox going forward. I think it's also helpful, again, to assess context, because when there are events like, what happened yesterday, or, are they hungry? Are they angry? Are they lonely? Are they tired? Are they stressed from work? Have the kids been, relentlessly needy? The world is triggering, right? And so I think assessing the context can be one of those things to help de-escalate the situation. But I love Alexis's answers on this.
I absolutely agree. I think every single time I talk to either one of you, I have so many more tools in my toolbox. And so I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. I kind of want to transfer a little bit into the big S word, sexual relationships, and when our partners are feeling insecure about their partners being sexual with somebody else, because it's something I've seen happen a lot in the ethical non-monogamous community, where you're excited for your partner, you're even helping them get ready for their date, and then you realize, oh man, they're going to be going and having sex with this person. I don't know how I feel about this. I feel left out, and all of these different things which can be triggering for us. And it's absolutely fascinating because you can prepare all you want. You can read all the books, you can listen to the podcasts, but until you're actually in that experience, it can be extremely triggering, extremely hard. And there's a fine line between letting go and connecting, right? And how we have to let go of some of our past experiences, our past judgments, all of these different things that can go into it, and still be a supportive partner and show up for either the person that is going to have a great time, or as the person who's coming back, and we now have to hold space for our partner's hard feelings without altering our behavior or saying, you know, I understand that you feel that way. Maybe I shouldn't. And then we automatically take on that energy, right? We automatically are altering what we're doing simply because our partner's having a hard time. So, how do you balance that when your partner is having a hard time with you seeing somebody else, going and spend the night with somebody else, and you know that they just had an incredible, mind blowing sexual experience with somebody else, and still holding space for all their feelings without taking that on? Oh, Lexus.
Well, this is where boundaries, beautiful big boundaries, come in. You can decide how much information you want to know about who they're going out with. You can decide how much information you want to know about how the date went. You can decide how much information you want to know about how the sex was, right? So boundaries, super important. And that's just for yourself. Like, I know for me, I don't need all the details. I want to know that you had a great time. I want to know this was positive for you, but all the rest of the stuff, I don't need to know. I don't need to know that. I think the other piece to this is recognizing probably two facts. Number one, everyone has a different experience with other people, and there may be sides of your partner that come out when they're with other people that you don't see. And so part of that is the patterns that you're in. Part of it is the energy that is elicited between the two of you. Part of that is, especially if you don't have the same similar interests that maybe your partner has with the other person that they're seeing. There's a lot of different contexts and levels for this, right? So part of that is recognizing that there's just facts of life. There might be other aspects of your partner's personality that comes out with other people, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be anything that you project negatively on you. And I think that's if I say the number one thing that people miss, I think in E&M, is that we expect them to have their own sort of like tight experience, or we expect it to be similar to us. And I think expectations and assumptions will always be the things that take us out of being able to have a great experience. So if you can recognize that, understand that, I think it'll lessen a lot of any confusion or hurt that comes up if we can just recognize that. And you look at it with your own like friends, right? You have a best friend who's got other friends. What you do with one best friend is going to be different than what you do with the other friend. Facts of life. And if we can extrapolate that to romantic situations, I think that would be a lot easier for people to understand. And the other thing is that our partners are seeking either similar or different experiences from us, right? Maybe they're pushing their boundaries. Maybe they're exploring something that we may not have an interest in, right? So being able to separate yourself from their experience in this is also going to be important. And also that's a part of the conversation, I think, in general, of when there are new partners, even just saying, hey, like what type of experiences are you looking forward to with this partner? It'll help you to differentiate and understand sort of what they're seeking as well. And I think that can also be helpful in all of this.
I absolutely love that. And the only thing that I would add to that is the comparison, right? Once we start comparing ourselves to others is when I think as people suffer the most, really, is truly trying to, oh, they had a great orgasm with this other partner. Well, let me give them one too. And really just this comparison thing where you're really stepping out of compersion or really just being so excited for your partner. And one thing that I think is really important to acknowledge here is you can feel compersion and envy. You can feel compersion and jealousy, right? You can absolutely honor both. And I know for me, I've had both happen. And it's interesting how essentially kind of like that old saying, the wolf that you feed, whether it's this positive or negative thing, is really going to be what pops up. Um, what I'm curious with you, Dr. Amber, on this subject is along the same lines, but what are some of those boundaries for you? And are they different for like different partners? And are they kind of the same as far as what you're willing to share and what you're wanting to know with different partners?
So again, I think that assessing the context of the conversation is really important, because ethical non-monogamy is a huge umbrella, right? Like you have swingers who like are basically a monogamish couple who occasionally invite very special guest stars into their sexual experiences, but they are, maybe they'll have a friendship with these people, but ultimately like that these very special guest stars are not going to be involved in the relationship, right? All the way to the other end of the spectrum, and poly people who are like, I cannot, demisexual people or asexual people who are like, if there's not an emotional connection, then I can't engage sexually. And so someone who is like falls more on the swinger end of the category may have very different feelings about this connection than, or this conversation, than someone who is a demisexual involved in polyamorous relationships, right? So I think it's similar to what Alexis said, like assess your boundaries with your partner. Like, how much do you want to know? And for me personally, like I love hearing the salacious details, but I'm also have a professional interest in human sexuality, and where the edges of the erotic imagination can help us grow both together and as individuals, and like things that I can think about differently, or like what aspect of this person's personality is, being nourished by having this kink fulfilled or playing out this fantasy, whether it's with me or someone else, right? And so again, it's having the sensitivity and the emotional depth to say, yes, I want to hear about this experience, or like, I'm glad you had a good time, but I don't need to know. And I agree that comparison is a thief of joy. And so for me, part of my personal responsibility in being secure and experiencing compersion is to show up being the very best version of myself that I can be, and that's where my physical health comes into play. That's where showing up at the gym comes into play. That's where, eating a healthy diet and avoiding alcohol and like all of these things that make me the best version of myself, because I know what I come to the table with. And I know that my partners value me because of what I bring to the table, and anything that they're experiencing with other people is not a threat to my relationship with them, because they value who I am. And so that's where the physical health, the mental health, and the sexual health all comes together. Like you can't separate these things, because if you're sitting on the couch playing video games and drinking beer and like eating Kentucky Fried Chicken, then of course you're going to feel threatened when your partner has a pleasurable experience with someone else, because you're not showing up as the best version of yourself.
I absolutely really, really love where you went, and especially showing up as your best version, because there's so much into it. A lot of us think of, just even going to the gym as just simply physical health, but I think the biggest component of that is actually mental health, and how really the hardest part of getting to the gym or of going to the gym is getting there. And once you're there, it is absolutely amazing. I can have a pretty stressful or just lethargic day where it's just draining energy, and I go to the gym and I immediately feel better afterwards. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. The other part of this question that I'm curious about, because there's a very fine line between being able to know information and the consent of the other individual involved, right? And for instance, I had a partner who, her partner loved taking pictures of their sexual experiences, and he had no problem with my partner sharing those pictures if she wanted to, right? And for me, I'm like you, I absolutely love all the details, and if there's a picture or two that you want to show me, I'm like, oh man, that's hot, like I really really like that. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. But, there's some people that want to keep their intimate moments more private and more to themselves. And so I'm just wondering how you balance of, if you have a partner that does like sharing all the salacious details and wants to, oh man, when he did this, I felt so good and all of that kind of stuff. And where that consent is with that other individual and where that line lies. Where does that lie with you, and how do you kind of explore that, Dr. Amber?
So I think that this is a really important question. And I have been, because I am a pediatrician, I have concerns obviously about all of the digital media that's out on the internet and like what's being shared with and without people's consent, again, across platforms. And, I personally don't put anything out on anywhere. Like I don't send pornographic imagery to anybody, like including the people that I care the most about and engage most closely with, because anything that is exchanged on a digital platform can show up in places that I didn't consent to. That said, I've seen these like little teeny sneaky cameras that can like be hidden in hotel rooms in Las Vegas or wherever, and so there may be non-consensual content out there. So again, I am meticulous about the sort of imagery that I approve of and that I send and receive. And, if I am receiving content from people, it's of them usually in like a group text where like everyone who's in the image is involved. But yeah, it squicks me out when I see images on websites and so forth where I'm like, do I know for sure that the other person who's in this has approved of this being sent out, into the wilds of the internet? And so it's an important question.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that a lot of people that especially are into sharing pictures really don't even think about consent. It's not even something that crosses their mind, and it's absolutely disgusting. I mean, truly. And there's, people getting sued for putting stuff on, different sites and all that kind of stuff because it's one of the most vulnerable violations I think that you can do to someone to actually share especially images of somebody in a sexual nature without their consent and enthusiastic consent. Alexis, how do you go about getting the consent of maybe not just the pictures but the sharing of the information of what your partner I mean, I guess with you it's a little different, right? Because you don't really like all the information. Yeah, never mind. I think I'm gonna ask you a
No,
different
I can
question.
answer though, because I did have a situation where this is extensively talked about, and I usually talk about it, in general. But my thing, so I was dating this guy who also had a girlfriend, and she was dating around as well. And so he would ask me, he was like, I love hearing about you with other people. And it just doesn't cross my mind to disclose. Like, if that makes sense, like I don't like run back to, oh my God, it's like it doesn't cross my mind to disclose stuff. So for him, I basically said that's not my context of like how I move around the world. So if there's something that you want to know, I will tell you all the things. I don't need to know all the things either, but that's just how generally I operate. And so I said, for him, I said, I'm comfortable. Like, if you want to share all the stuff that we've done with your girlfriend, that's fine with me. I don't actually need to know all the things. I think at the time I just had a lot of stuff going on in my life, and it was just like more input that I just didn't really need at the time. So he was like, okay, that's cool. That's cool. And then he also had tons of photos and also like nudes that he liked to share. And he said, I have no problem sending them to you, but I would prefer that if you're going to, and they were like artistic nudes and things like that. And he was like, if you're going to show someone else, that you ask me first. And so that's how we just handled it, right? And again, I'm not also the type of person to send nudes either way. Like I don't know. I'm not hip to these things these days. Because again, who knows where the photo is going to end up? who knows who you're going to share it with, right? So I think that there's a lot to that. But he was one of my, I remember this clearly. He was like one of my first conversations around information sharing. What are you comfortable with? And then if there are photos involved, sort of here's how I'd like to handle it. And so again, I think it's just generally it's a conversation, and then you upholding to your agreement, of course, with integrity and trust.
Absolutely, absolutely love that. I love that you're totally okay with him sharing information about you, but you're like, I don't necessarily want to know information about you guys. But yeah, if you want to share, that's fine. That's actually that's beautiful and really it's fascinating. Dr. Amber, yeah, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I feel like we live in a moment where nudes are like the currency of dating, right? Like there's not very many people in the world that haven't sent some level of a nude image to someone that they were flirting with or involved with, or in a marriage with, or sexually like monogamous or not relationship with, right? Like this content is out there everywhere. And so I think it's an important conversation to have with children and with minors, that this stuff is out there. And I always advise my adolescent patients, like, please don't send that type of content, because once it's out of your hands, you don't have any control over where it goes. And having these conversations with minors in a sensitive way, I think is our responsibility as adult professionals and parents in their lives, and aunties. I've had this conversation with my niece and my sister. I'm reading a book right now called Yes, Your Kid, that was written by a PhD psychologist, all about how to talk with children about development and human sexuality and the pornography culture, because kids are being raised with a bottomless source of pornography in their pockets. And if it's not in their pockets, it's in the pockets of their friends on the playground. And so I think that this is a really important conversation to learn to have sensitively with children.
Thank you so much for adding that. It really is so incredibly important. Something as you're talking, an example is a um, friend of a family friend. Their daughter was just exploited. This gentleman, was able to solicit nude pictures, and as a result, was threatening her family for money and different monetary gain, which is frightening how much that's happening. And if we don't talk about it, I was raised in a household where we didn't talk about anything sexuality. They could joke about it all day long, but an actual healthy conversation, that just wasn't how we were raised. But especially in today's world where you have so much access, and there are unfortunately so many predators out there that are going to try and exploit you, it's really important to have these conversations and to protect them. I know there was a kid in Utah, maybe last year, that ended up, committing suicide as a result of being exploited like this. And it is so important to really, truly have these sensitive conversations, especially with children, before they're ever in that situation and they really truly just don't know what to do. Especially, as of this age where we are seeking approval, we want people to like us, and we're being told, oh, if you do this, then, you're going to be liked. And it's so harmful if they don't have the tools to really understand what's happening. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And again, I think that, like you've both said, it is important across, multiple platforms and conversations outside of just ethical non-monogamy. So yeah, thank you for bringing up that subject, Dr. Amber. During the holidays, I know holidays specifically can be really hard for people, especially in the ethical non-monogamous community, where a lot of people have been, for lack of a better word, excommunicated from their families. Their families have a hard time with their lifestyle, and as a result, they don't have anywhere to go for the holidays. And it can be hard seeing your partner either go with their family or friends or whatever that looks like. And so how do you how would you approach holding space for a partner during the holidays and really being sensitive to their experience without altering, what you're doing in your experience and how you celebrate the holidays? I'm curious about your perspective on this, Dr. Amber.
I thought you were going to ask Alexis on this question, but so for me, it's really exciting that there is a growing acceptance of found families, whether that is, and I think it's especially true in the LGBTQ community, where many people become detached from their families of origin over issues related to their sexuality, or for me, I love my family, but I have a clinical practice here. And I'm not a religious person. I'm like, the holidays don't really mean anything to me. It's like a commercial, season of obligation. And so for me, I enjoy just like having quiet time to read a book. I enjoy actually being there for families in my practice who may need me. And I would be receptive to an invitation for a found family type of gathering. And I'm always on the phone, like texting and chatting with people. And again, I feel like this is a hard one for me to relate to or give any type of advice on, because obligatory holiday celebrations don't really mean anything to me. But I think that found family can be important during this time.
I actually love that perspective, and I relate to that because especially over the last 10, 15 years, I would much rather spend the majority of the holidays with my chosen family rather than my biological family. And it's not because I don't love them or and I don't want to see them or anything like that. It's just it's less stressful, and I enjoyed a little bit more with my chosen family. Alexis, how does this look for you, especially during the holidays, of holding space for your partner and not necessarily altering the way you celebrate based on what their experience may be?
So I love Dr. Amber's answer. I love your answer, because this is totally important to know where people are coming from. Like, there are some partners that I have and have had who are like, F the holidays. I don't want to be a part of any of the shenanigans, and don't invite me to any parties. And I'm like, okay, that's fine too. And then I have partners who are like, what's the Christmas bucket list? Are we going ice skating or whatever? And I'm just like, oh God, I don't know that I want to do that either, but yes, I will see if I can get on the ice with you. So I think it's just a matter of finding out where everyone is, what they like, and maybe doing a whole like seasonal bucket list between partners too. I love making stuff fun in general. So if they're like, if I have a partner and I've had a couple partners who said, hey, I want to go to like Christmas Town at Busch Gardens. Let's do that. Awesome. I've had partners who were like, don't call me until January 1st. Awesome. Just let me know where you want to be and we'll just make it work, right? So I don't necessarily hold to it has to be a certain way. And I sort of like micro cultivation of experiences. So if there's certain things that people want to do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But always but I think it's super important. Always understand where people are coming from, just so you know how to navigate. And I think that's the most important piece, and the rest is figure outable. But again, don't project, oh, you should want to do this. Everyone else is going out. Oh, you're being a humbug. Like, no, respect where people are coming from and allow them to have their experience. And you can have your experience. And then now you know how to navigate where people are. And, holidays are just chosen family, people's death around this time as well. I mean, there's a lot going on for people, stuff going on in the world too. So I think it's always good to be cognizant of the mental load that people are carrying, and just take them for where they are.
I absolutely love that, and really communicate, right? And being able to both communicate and ask qualifying questions of what you need, which I think is just absolutely incredibly important to really be able to truly show up and how it's gonna support our partners in the way that they they really truly most need. Um, you know, I'm getting close to the end, but what I am really curious about that I'm really excited to hear your perspectives on this is when your partner is having a breakdown, when they're having such a hard time and they don't know how to emotionally regulate, and maybe they don't even really know how to communicate what's going on with them. How would you say is the best way to show up in those moments of just a complete breakdown where, you know, maybe they don't even know what's going on with them, they don't really understand what's happening, and they just, you know, maybe need a partner to sit with them. And, you know, I know on one of my groups, a lady was saying, someone just handing me a tissue while I'm crying makes me feel like they're trying to tell me to stop crying, you know. And I thought that was fascinating because I think a lot of us is automatically, I want to ease your pain, right? It's not that I want you to stop crying. It's that, oh, I thought I could use this and I thought this would be an act of love. And there's a fine line between showing an act of love and actually showing up in how your partner is needing. So when they're in the middle of this breakdown and just having a hard time with their emotional regulation, what are some maybe tools that you've personally used or experienced on how to show up in those moments best for your partner, Alexis?
So in the moments where I've seen people just not be able to articulate anything, articulate just anything at all, they just have to just, that cathartic release, um, is I usually go into a space of just sitting next to them. Just that's all you can do. Like sometimes it's just your presence. Um, I will, because I am like caretaker at heart, like, is there anything I can get you to eat or drink? So I will ask that part, like get presence to like what's going on with the body. But for that example of that you shared earlier, if getting a tissue for you is a communication that I want you to stop doing whatever it is that you're doing, I probably won't even do anything at all and just be there. And then kind of just say, like, when there is something that you feel that I can do, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just here and just, not on my phone, just sitting next to them. Or if they don't want like super tight physical space, sitting on the other side of the couch. I think it's important not to rush people through their emotional process. But I also think it's important when they are in emotional process to be able to at least give some feedback so that the person who is supporting them can have an idea of context. But other than that, sometimes I think we forget just being physically present with people can also just be completely and utterly enough.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I truly agree that, especially in those moments, just presence, being completely present, you know, is so incredibly important, especially with that. Dr. Amber, on the same question, if they are wanting some help or advice on that emotional regulation, what are some tools and tips that you help people uh, understand with emotional regulation, especially in the middle of some hard moments?
So I think it's important to assess whether the person who is on the receiving end of this, like, what's their attachment style? Like, I don't buy into the love languages for historical reasons of the author's motives who wrote that, and we could get into that at a later time. But I do think that there's something to attachment theory, and a secure attachment versus an avoidant attachment versus a dysregulated attachment versus an anxious attachment style. And for me, I have an avoidant attachment style. And I know, like, I have other people in my life who are like, you know what, I just need to isolate right now. And I'll check in with them and be like, are you okay? Are you alive? Are you sober? Are you eating? Like, and they need that space and sort of put a boundary up around themselves. And there are some people who, have this like anxious attachment style. And when they're feeling overwhelmed, they'll like sort of grasp to the point of smothering. And so I think, again, like checking in with what they need and where they're coming from and how I can best show up, because someone who is an avoidant like me, or just wants to isolate when they're feeling overwhelmed, my approach to that person is going to be very different than someone who, maybe has one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake and is like, I need this from you, no, back off. So that I can't really give like blanket advice because it's going to vary so much from person to person. But I do think an assessment of biological needs, like, are you eating? Are you sober? Are you self-medicating on substances? Like, are you sleeping okay? Are you missing work as a result of this? Like really assessing kind of like the nuts and bolts can be helpful in figuring out how I can show up emotionally for them.
I think that's absolutely beautiful and really absolutely important. Because I know for like myself, I have a dysregulated attachment style that I've worked a lot on to become secure. But there's times where I want someone to reach out, and then there's times where I'm just like, no, I just want to isolate, and I don't want to talk to anybody. And it's really important to assess and really those qualifier questions, right? That communication of just like the basics, and then what do you need, and can I provide that? Which is really something you said I'm really curious about, Dr. Amber, is you said with the avoidant attachment style and the anxious attachment style, right? So you're avoidant and your partner's anxious and they want to smother. How do you draw the boundary of this is what I can provide, but I can't necessarily do this all the time, right? How do you walk that boundary of showing up for your partner in those times, in those moments, without taking on that anxious attachment and letting yourself be smothered by them?
Honestly, I think that's an ongoing negotiation, right? Like this, being in that type of relationship, and I think there's a lot of, it's important to recognize that dynamic is there, because someone who has an anxious attachment style, if they're paired with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, if that smothering instinct in order to feel secure starts to take on too much, the avoidant person's going to like detach and walk away. And so just recognizing that dynamic is there and having ongoing conversations about it, and like feeling and recognizing and calling out when it's happening, of like, I'm starting to feel a little bit smothered here. Like, I can provide you with some reassurance and we can have conversations about, the fact that I'm not going to pull away and walk away from you entirely, but I need you to give me some space because I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by your grasping at this moment. And, like, this isn't all a one-sided thing. It's, these conversations are constantly in flux, and that's the nature of being in relationships, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And really the nature of what I call healthy poly as well is, the work is never done. We are always working on ourselves, and there's going to be times where, man, we feel like, Superman or Superwoman. I have, everything that I need. I'm a rock star. And then moments where the rug just gets pulled out from under you, and you're just like, oh shit, I'm not okay right now. And sometimes I even have to remind myself that it's okay to not be okay, right? And it's really a beautiful thing. With you, Alexis, I'm curious, what is your attachment style?
So my attachment style shifts. I've worked a lot on my avoidant tendencies. So I tend to shift a little bit more towards anxious, secure, like somewhere in there. And for me, what I've focused on of late has been when someone is reaching or I'm reaching for someone, if you can answer that in that reach moment, like, are you there? Can you see me? Can you hear me? And that person can provide that reassurance in whatever that way is, can create secure moments. So instead of going for, a complete shift in how you relate and attach to people, can you create secure in moments? And as those moments build up and there's trust built up over those moments, you can shift your attachment style in any given relationship. So it's elastic, it's movable. It just depends on what you want to create. And so I think for me, I've always been fascinated, by how people move along the spectrum. And so I've been working on that lately, and it's been really, really interesting just to see the shift in relating and relationship dynamics when that becomes the crux of the questions. Like, if I reach for you, are you there? And are you there? Can you see me? Can you hear me? And like that drop in can be enough to create that secure moment where people can, again, de-escalate, come back into connection, and feel really like baseline good with how they're relating to people.
I absolutely love that, especially the secure moments. Is that so when you're having a hard time personally, is that the essentially the way that you started regulating and creating secure attachments yourself is um, figuring out if I reach for this person, they're going to be there. If I reach out to this person, they're going to respond in a timely manner, all that kind of stuff. Is that essentially what has helped you the most in your journey during those hard moments?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And taking it moment by moment instead of looking for some sort of big response that somehow is going to bring me into a space of security with myself. And I think, again, it's like going to the gym. Like, you can't just go in and think you're just going to go in and push 500 on the leg press. Like, that day one, you're not going to do that, right? It's a building up. And so I like to use that analogy to also keep myself present too. If I can build a certain amount of moments, then that will help to create this baseline of secure relating. And so that's proven to be actually really helpful.
I absolutely love that, and I think it's amazing. Really, really tips. Um, my last question for you, Dr. Amber, is along the same lines. Is really during moments of um, maybe disconnect with any potential partner that you have. What are some little tools and tips that have personally helped you feel more secure in some of your attachments?
So I think my perspective on this again is a little bit different because I'm solo poly, and that looks very different than someone who is coupled or partnered or in a closed triad, or even shares a home with someone. Like, I have just adapted so well. Like, I haven't lived with a romantic partner since 2015. And so I have a lot of emotional stamina at this point, and I don't necessarily reach out to a romantic partner in order to help me feel more validated or secure or anything like that. And so my personal experience is going to be very, very different from, sort of like I guess the norm of coupled partners. Occasionally I do want a little bit of reassurance from the people that I'm involved with, but by and large, I think what makes solo polyamory, and people throw that term around a lot. They're like, oh, I have a nesting partner, but I'm solo polyamorous. I'm like, no, 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 you're not. Those two things are not the same thing, right? But like, I truly am solo polyamorous. And so I I don't necessarily reach out to romantic partners as a mechanism of helping me feel supported or secure. I have a whole network of friends who helps with that. And that's one of the beautiful things about solo polyamory, is that I don't have like one person who's responsible for that emotional labor. It's distributed. It's a co-op.
I absolutely love that. And I'm just curious if that your answer is a lot of your security based on essentially your own autonomy and you just being able to work through your stuff privately and on your own and being able to really just kind of dig down into what you're feeling just completely by yourself then?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that solo polyamory is an exceptionally good fit for me as a relationship structure, because I value my autonomy above all else. And I'm respectful of other people's needs, But I'm a free agent, and I don't really have a desire to operate differently.
I absolutely love that. And I think it's so incredibly important because there are a lot that are solo poly or even exploring solo poly and really trying to understand what that means for them. And it's hard, especially in a monocentric society, to be solo poly and be able to truly be like, I'm gonna own my stuff, and this is not anybody else's responsibility, and I don't need anybody else's input or reassurance because I'm just gonna work through my shit. So I think that's just so important to add to this. Alexis, I know you essentially pretty much answered that question. So my question to you is, how do you balance providing a safe space for somebody to be able to explore that autonomy completely, and yet still feel secure and safe with you while they're exploring on their own, doing their own thing, and all of that? Like, how do you balance really providing a safe space? Like, you're completely free to explore, you're completely free to do whatever you want, and whatever you experience, I'll still be here, and we can talk about it, we can come together, we can whatever, without essentially taking on any of the stuff that they may be experiencing or feeling.
That's a great question. I really don't know how I do it. I can tell you that there is a part of me, because I value my independence as well. And it's really cool to hear Dr. Amber's experience around her solo poly, because my solo poly is different. And while for me, kind of doing my own thing, having autonomy to do my own thing, like when people come into my world, and some people, I don't know, like everyone is a little bit different. For the people who, I think it's just I come from, okay, let me just back this all the way up. I come from a space that no matter what level of partnership, not levels of partnership, we're individuals before we come into any sort of partnership. Like, that's my whole, like, we're individuals. So for me, if I am dating or seeing someone, and also, doing all the other things that I'm doing as well, I always come from, you were an individual first before you met me, especially if we're not in solo poly, like before I was solo poly, right? You still have to grow. I have a huge, huge value around evolution and growth and contribution. And for me, I think that's why being E&M and poly in general has been so amazing, is because anytime prior to this, when I was in a monogamous relationship, growth was threatening. Growth was completely threatening. And for me, I'm like, I want you to grow. I want you to go out there and find out who you are. And for me, maybe it's a little bit of my kink as well. I want to see who you're going to become. I want to see what you're going to learn about. I want to see all the things. And so I have this value that if we're going to be in some sort of relating, you need to be pursuing your own thing. Because if you're not pursuing your own thing, that means you have a lot of time to be focused on other things, and hopefully not fully focused on me, because I'm not going to be fully focused on you, because I've got a lot of things I'm doing. And I think because that is such a huge value of mine, it makes it really easy for me to say, go out and explore, go have fun. You want to go, explore some level of kink, BDSM, whatever. You want to go hike the Himalayas. I'm not hiking the Himalayas. So I'm not going to be an impact play. Sorry, it's not my thing. I'm going to want you to go find that for you, and I'm going to be happy for you to find that. And I think that has been a huge part of the experience. And I want my freedom. I want you to have your freedom. I want you to grow. I will tell you this. I had a consult with someone recently. He's 80 and his wife is like 70 something. And they were still getting it in once a week. I was like, hey, y'all, this is amazing. But he had done a lot of sacrificing for his wife. And he's like, I only have 7 to 8 years left. I just want to do my own thing. And it was a moment of such intense, I could feel the intense resentment and regret that he had going on, because he hadn't had a space to grow. And I always come back to that conversation of, I don't want to be at 80 or 85 or 90 and think I have something still left in the tank. Like, I want to know that I put it out all in the field. And I want everyone around me to know that they put it out on the field as well, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. And I absolutely love what you shared. And really, I relate to that so much. Growth and your personal evolution is so incredibly important, especially to anyone that I'm going to be in a dynamic with. I cannot, red flags are there for a reason. If those red flags pop up, then I can support you as a friend, but anything more than that, that's not my place, because you really need to be working on yourself. Going to the gym, eating healthy is all a part of that as well. And even reading books, podcasts, and really understanding your BS, because we all have it. We truly do. And if we don't work on it and it gets thrown on me, there is nothing that's going to repel me faster. Not a single thing. If you start throwing your stuff on me, I'm just going to be like, you know what? I appreciate you. I can support you from afar, but I'm gonna step left and keep going, because I don't want to do this. And so I really, really appreciate that perspective and think it's absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much for both of you coming on the show today. There's so many tidbits. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this, and I'm gonna be getting my notepad out and really taking some notes. There's so many good tools that both of you shared. So thank you so much. Dr. Amber, if anybody wants to work with you or take some of your classes that I know you're doing, where can they find you?
So my website is artemisluxurywellness.com. And from there, you can get to my Instagram, my Patreon. I'm going to be launching confidential consults with Dr. Amber, where if people have have questions about, relationships or human sexuality or, hormone shifts, mismatched libido, all of these things, like postpartum issues, like just these chapters and growth that happen throughout the lifespan, that I can provide a little bit of context from a clinical standpoint. I'll be launching that probably after the first of the year, but artemisluxurywellness.com is where all of my stuff is.
Thank you so much. And Alexis, if people want to work with you and find out more about you, where would they find you at?
Well, they can find me at alexiselogan.com. I see clients in the DC, Virginia, Maryland area, so you can check me out there. I also have a separate coaching company as well, Soul Freak, and that's where we start blending more of the spiritual and sexual together. In 2024, I'm super excited about that, and really tackling the bigger issues of how we relate and communicate, which is my passions. And really supporting people around really creating sexually satisfying ecosystems for themselves.
Absolutely love it. Thank you so much for sharing. Anybody listening, as usual, if you just go look in those show notes, I'll have links so you can find both Dr. Amber and Alexis Logan a lot easier. And thank you, ladies, so much for coming on the show today. I really, really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I learned so much.